We good? Awesome. Welcome to the session, Workflow Logic for Beginners. We're going to demystify the basics. Yeah. All right, I'm Jonathan Weaver. I'm a consultant with Smarter Consulting. We do have a booth out there in the vendor area. Stop by. We have a couple of really nice grill kits that you need to check or drive home. You cannot take them on the carry-on in the airplane because they got pokey stabby things in them. But we also have a red Clippy t-shirt, size extra large. So come enter to win one of the prizes. Also, John, just so you know, this thing says I had 35 minutes total. So we're going to go with the timer on the whiteboard. Here's all my contact information. Feel free to take a picture or get it later. I am the whiteboard guy. Might see it, I'm not sure. I'm the whiteboard guy. So instead of killing you with PowerPoint, I'm going to kill you with PowerPoint inside of whiteboard. Yeah, welcome to Comms V Next. Hope y'all are awake. Make sure you stop by all the sponsors. Say thanks to the sponsors. We have this cool Logitech earbuds that I'm going to give away at the end. So make sure you say hi, thank all the sponsors, get all their business cards, enter all the raffles. Some of them have some really freaking cool swag too. And all right, so who is this session for? Primarily, when I created the session initially, my thought was this is for the new citizen developers. So you're an accounting person, you're an HR person, you're a call center person, you may be even an IT, but your brand, someone said, I need you to do the SharePoint stuff. I need you to build some workflows behind the SharePoint stuff, or you need to make a Microsoft Forms to collect survey information. Well, now we have to do something with that data, so maybe you have to use Power Automate or Nintex or K2. No, K2 doesn't exist anymore. Any of those Webcon, any of those workflow tools to get that information from the forms or from the SharePoint lists or from wherever and do something with them. So then you get into the workflow tool and you're like, all right, how do I do the different things inside of this tool? I'm not a programmer. I didn't go to computer science classes. I understand what if and then means, but what's if then else? And what is this switch thing? And what's do while? What is these loops and all this kind of stuff? So in my mind, when I envisioned this, it was for these new citizen developers to be able to understand the new tasks that they're being given. That said, also if you're feeling overwhelmed by technical terms, because now you're asking someone that is doing the workflows, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I made a case statement and I have switches, and then we did a do while with an apply to each inside of it, and we're doing a get items, but because I did a get items, I got to do this other, and you're like, what? Slow down, go back. I don't understand half the words you said in the order that you said them. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've been building workflows for years. I started in programming, hated writing code, found out that QA actually is a job, not just that fantasy I'm going to test video games as a kid thing. And I did 8 years in QA where I developed automated test software or test cases. So I built all the workflows. My wife was in this SharePoint thing, and she kept telling me I needed to come over to SharePoint and do this SharePoint designer workflow stuff. And then she dragged me kicking and screaming into the SharePoint world. And then I found Flow and Power Automate. SharePoint. I loved SharePoint Designer. I loved InfoPath. They went away, and we got this new online stuff. So I'm now a Power Platform developer. I primarily use Power Automate, SharePoint, Forms, and I put some Power Apps in front of it if I need to. So that's my background and where I'm coming from, and I like to focus on the new people. I like to focus on the people who aren't computer science degrees. They haven't been in IT as a hardcore IT programmer, developer, whatever, for years and years. I like to teach the basics at the basic level for people who need that, bring it all down. My wife did a session, an intro to SharePoint session way back when I first got dragged in. And she's like, I said, I need you to dumb it down. And she goes, okay. Created a session, ran me through it. And I said, no, dumb it down one more level for me. And that's where I like to live when I present. So hopefully it won't be too basic for everybody. And I'm not intending to insult anyone's intelligence. I'm just going to try and give you the very basics, and feel free to interrupt at any time and ask questions if I'm not dumbing it down far enough, or if I'm dumbing it down too far. Either way, feel free to raise your hand, ask a question, blurt out. I am easily distracted, so feel free. The slides will make sure we keep on track. Cool? All right, so what will we learn? We're going to talk about get and update, and the kind of the variances between them. We're going to talk about if-then statements, if-then-else statements, and kind of how those break down, what they mean, and how you use the individual pieces to that. And everything's not enumerated here, but switch and case, which is different than if and then. We'll have some like do while and do until apply to each. We're going to talk about run after, which is very important and has caused me so many headaches when I get that one wrong. Some troubleshooting basics. And then I've got some other little components thrown in there. This should be primarily agnostic as far as the technology platform. So there will be a few pieces in there that I know are specific to Power Automate, but that the other tools should have a similar concept to. It may be a different name, but for the most part, this should be tool agnostic. This is just about how you're going to build logic. Okay, fair enough? Oh, and it wants to scroll now. It's been doing that to me. All right, we'll use the hand. All right, so what is workflow logic? Logic, structured decision making. Workflow is the flow of the work. So structured logic inside of a flow of work. Think of it as a flow chart. Everyone has seen a flow chart, yes? Okay. I can't imagine that any of y'all have not seen a flow chart. So the workflow logic itself is that flow chart turned into actions. So it's easy to draw, first this and then this, then this, then this, and maybe some branching. And it's easy to draw that. But then when you have to go build it, you have to know more of the syntactical piece to it of, yeah, I drew this. You see this little decision. There's a yes and a no. But once I get into a tool, what does that mean? What do I use to do that? And this is actually going to be one of our first pieces because this is truly an if-then-else right here. Okay, using the mouse. Yes, sir. All right. So if-then. If-then is your most basic piece of logic. You use this all day, every day. I'm a math guy. I've got a tattoo of pi on my back. I get tired of people saying, I'm never going to use algebra in the real world. It's not real. Yes. Yes, it is. You use algebra every day, especially if you have kids, you're on a budget, and you're going through McDonald's drive-thru. Because you need to know the price that you're going to pay at the end, because you may only have $20, but you've got 3 kids, and so you need 3 Happy Meals, plus 1 value meal number 3, plus 2 apple pies, plus a milkshake. That's algebra. You just used algebra in your real world, and you're a soccer mom, and you're the one who told me that you will never use algebra again, right? If-then statements, you use them every day. You go, am I hungry? If I'm hungry, then I need to go eat. If-then. You just did it. If I just got out of bed, then I probably need to brush my teeth. If I'm getting ready for bed, then I probably need to put on pajamas. Right? If I'm going to the airport, then I probably need to drive there. That's a real basic conditional logic you use every single day. Now, going with the next piece of an if then else, it's a second condition. So if I'm hungry, then I need to eat. If I'm not hungry, I don't need to eat, right? So if I'm hungry, then I need to eat. Else, I don't need to eat. Okay? Good? All right. Again, I told you this is super basic. So also, these were created with AI, with an AI tool that was not a Microsoft product. So you might see a little bit of spelling issues. It's gotten way better with the spelling, but still has some issues. All right. So more advanced than an if then else is a switch with cases. So instead of saying if I'm hungry, there's only two choices, right? I'm either hungry or I'm not hungry. Okay, but what if the question is, what color should I use? Well, I have a box of 8 crayons, or a box of 64 crayons if you're in the rich family, right? But in grade school, I had a box of 8 crayons. So I can either do nested if statements. So if I want red, it's this crayon, else it's one of those other ones, right? If I want it, I can nest it, and I can say, if I want red, then it's this crayon, else if I want green, then I want this one, else if I want blue, it's this one. So you see how we can nest them, and we truly have 3 if statements, but you have the ifs. The third if statement is the else of the second one, and that whole piece is the else of the first one. Okay, that gets difficult if you had 64 crayons or 50 states in the United States. You can't nest that deep. A lot of tools only go 7 deep. So what do? You change it to a switch statement. So now what you say is, what is the name of the color that I'm looking for? Cyan. Well, that's not in my 8. So the color is cyan. And so then you come down, so that would be your value. You start with a switch, you come down to the value, which is cyan. And now these cases, what you would put in each case is the color equals cyan, color equals red, color equals blue, color equals green. Those are your cases. And then underneath each case is the action. So if the color is blue, then go do the thing. A more real-world scenario, I'm doing a purchase request. So we need to know what the total value, dollar value of the purchase is. If it's less than $10,000, we go down to case 1 and we auto-approve it. If it's between $10,000 and $25,000, we go down case number 2, and we know that we need a director to approve it. If it's $25,000 to $100,000, we need an executive to approve it. If it's over $100,000, we need the board to approve it, right? So those are your switches. And rather than nesting all of our if then else's, you have it way more clean. And then at the bottom, most workflows at the end of all that, you can come back together, or you can end your workflow. It was done. It was under $10,000, auto approve, market is done, we're good. And the workflow's done. But if it needs board approval, maybe there's a lot more that has to happen, because before we go to the board, we probably need to have someone review it. So we do a lot of steps. Maybe at the very end, you want to come back together and send an email out to the person who submitted it and say, this is done. So at the bottom of all of these actions, instead of having 4 email actions, you would come back at the bottom to 1, send out an email saying, we did all the things. Okay, makes sense? Okay, any questions about switches? All right. Cool. All right, do while versus do until. If you flip a coin, what are your two choices? Heads or tails, right? Okay, so if I said to you, we're gonna keep doing a thing. I'm gonna keep flipping the coin, and we're not gonna stop until the coin flips tails. Okay, so I flip the coin, it's heads. We keep going. I flip a coin, it's heads. We keep going. I flip a coin, it's tails. We're done. That was a do until. A do while would be, I say, as long as I keep flipping heads, we're going to keep going. Real world scenario, I have an item that's going through waiting for approval. You can do, it's literally two sides of the same coin. So same scenario. We're going to keep doing it while I'm flipping heads, or we're going to keep doing it until I flip a tails, right? So I've got an item that's in a status of pending. So while it is in the status of pending, I'm going to go do a loop every 2 days. I'm going to send an email saying, hey, don't forget about my item. I need you to go approve it every 2 days. And while it is in status of pending, as soon as it switches from pending to completed, it's no longer in pending, so it stops doing the thing. Or you can say, because that one was specific to pending, or maybe that was called pending approval. So while it's in pending approval, and it can end up in 5 different statuses after that. It could go to approved, it could go to rejected, it could go to need more information, it could go to pause or cancel. So while it's in pending status, we want to send a reminder every couple days. Or it's in pending status, and the only thing we need to care about is if it goes to completed status. So we would do a do until. Maybe there's a process that while it's in pending, they may change it to 5 different statuses of reassigned to Bob, reassigned to Jane, waiting for board approval, all these things. And then at the very end, they say, it's approved. Now the do until is the important one. So we're going to send a reminder every 2 days saying, hey, don't forget about me until it has been marked as completed. Okay, does that make sense, the distinction between the two and when you would use the different option? Awesome. Good. This is going really quickly. We're going to have a lot of Q&A time. All right, so run after. This is one of those that this term is very specific to Power Automate, but I'm pretty sure that all of the tools have some sort of a run after. It may have a different name, but what this does is it says, I have an action, and then I have another action. The standard is run after the previous one succeeded. So if the first thing is to do an approval, and then the next action is to send an email saying that it's been approved, if the approval action fails, like a very common failure is that you are sending an approval to an email address that's in a variable, but there was no email address ever put into the variable, so it's blank. So the approval action goes, oh, I'm sending it to blank. I can't do that, and it fails. The next action that is sending an email saying we're done, it's good, should never happen because the approval action failed. So in that case, what I do personally, I will do a parallel item. So you can have 2 items side by side. When the approval completes one way or another, you have 2 actions. You have the, hey, we did it, or hey, it broke. So usually that one's creating a service ticket that then pings me that says, hey, you need to go fix this. And usually it's because someone put in their division instead of their department. And so when I went to look up their department, It's like human resources. That's not a department. That's a division. There is no manager there. There's a director. So that one, you do the run after of the send an email saying it's good, and the run after would be on success. And the parallel action of sending a service desk ticket, the run after says if it failed. So that gives you your branching to help, which we'll also talk about in the troubleshooting piece. That gives you your branching for keeping track of the different routes that you need to go and notifying somebody if an action doesn't work. Get items, which we'll talk about too. That's another one which get items we should have already talked about. Weird. I probably mixed it up. If it tries to get an item and it can't get an item because there isn't an item with that name or that ID, then it'll come back with an error message saying there was 0 returned, so you can't process anything based on that. That's another big scenario for the on failure. Send an email saying, hey, Bob's tried to do the thing, but there's no thing to do. Okay? Good on run after? Excellent. Don't do that. All right, so compose. This is another one that is in Power Automate that the other workflows have a similar one, probably a different name. But compose, I love compose. It's probably the most powerful action in Power Automate. It's the Swiss Army knife of actions. So inside of a compose action, you can temporarily store, format, or restructure data. It's great for combining fields. It's good for previewing logic. And you can see at the bottom an example is first name plus space plus last name. So if you've got like a Microsoft form that you've sent out to the world and they fill it out, and a form. My first name is Jonathan. My middle initial is M. My last name is Weaver. My email address is this. My whatever. You can use a compose to pull in the first name field plus a quote space quote, which will give you the space in between your names, plus last name. And that will put it all into one word. That way, in future things, when you're like, send an email, instead of putting dear first name, last name, you can put dear, the output of the compose, which will be Jonathan Weaver. Additionally, you can think of it similar to storing a variable, but this is something that's not going to change. So you would use a variable if it's things that are changing, like the current status or the current approver. If you've got a multi-step approver process, you might want to have a variable called current approver so that at any point along the way, you know who it is. But with the compose, if you have something more like a first and last name where it's not going to change at all during the entire workflow, it's always going to be this person's name. You would use it in a compose so you can use the same output over and over and over. When we say formatting or restructuring data, a compose statement is also where you can use an expression, which we're not going to get into expressions specifically in this session, but an expression is something like format date, convert integer to string. So if you're bringing in a number, or you're bringing in a string that is like a zip code string, so they typed in 5 numbers, but you need, for whatever reason, to turn that into an integer, you can do that inside of a compose statement with an expression. I use this all the time for dates because Power Automate likes to use UTC, which is bad when you're 7 hours different. And so your date now says it happened yesterday or it happened tomorrow. And it's like, no, it actually happened today. So I use a format date time, use the field that came in, whether it's the date submitted or the date that someone clicked approve. You do format date, you put in that piece of data from one of your other actions, and then you can say, I want it to be Central Time. You nest them with the convert time zone and all that, but then you can tell it, do I want, date, the day, month, year, month, day, month, year, day. Do I want time on it? Do I want it to say Friday the 14th? All of the different options of formatting. You use a compose statement to restructure that kind of data. And again, I'm talking super basic, not going into a lot of the scenarios. There are entire 1 and 2 hour sessions just on writing expressions. So previewing logic, another thing, and I'll hit on this in the troubleshooting. When I'm having issues with the logical flow, I use compose statements inside of it all the time to just show me the data. It's kind of like the old school hello world pop-ups. So as a programmer, we would do that if we're having a problem with a chunk of code and we don't know where along the line it is. We'll throw in like a pop-up print thing for the screen, like 8 different spots along the way. And we're like, okay, it got to lines, the pop-up will say, you made it to line 37. You made it to line 102. You made it to line 255. And so as it's going through the code, it'll pop up the little thing for you and go, okay, I know I made it this far. Next, I didn't make it to line 125. So it's somewhere between this break and that break. I use that all the time. It doesn't pop up and break necessarily, but what I can do is I can put the different values in there so that when I review the workflow, it errors at the bottom. I can go look at that flow run and I can see along the way, this compose statement is empty. So it clearly didn't get it didn't get data from a previous thing. And that's why down here, it was like, I don't have any data. Or you can see, it's the wrong person. Maybe you put in the wrong field into the action. All right. Again, Swiss Army knife. It's got all of the tools. So questions on compose statements or compose actions?
Yes. You kind of said it doesn't really write to a variable, but like you took first name and last name and compose. How do you call that out later?
So the compose is its own action. And so later on in another, like in a send email, you would put dear, and then it's called dynamic values, dynamic content. It will give you all of the previous actions and any data from any of those actions that you can use. So you type outputs in Power Automate, you type outputs, and that's all that comes out of a compose is outputs. And so you put that outputs in as instead of putting in the variable called their name, you put in the output from that compose statement into your email, and then it'll say, Dear Jonathan Weaver. And it's a good time to point out, probably should have added this in the troubleshooting step. When I do an intro to Power Automate, my 2 biggest tips. Number 1, the most important part of a Power Automate flow is the title. If you don't change the title of your Power Automate flow, you will have 37 workflows that are all called when an item is created. And then you have to click on each one trying to find the right one. So for your company, you need to have a naming convention for your workflows. I personally have, the first thing is what technology it's starting from. So if it's coming from a SharePoint list, the first 2 letters are SP dash. And then I have a naming structure based on where it's coming from, or MSF for forms, or PA for Power Apps, or SQL if it's coming out of SQL. So that's the first most important piece of a workflow is the title. The second most important piece of a workflow is the title of each individual action. If you don't name your compose actions, every action can be renamed. So this compose action, I would rename it to full name. That way, when you get down 37 actions later and you're like, I need the outputs from compose 2 or compose 3, Maybe it was compose 4. It will just keep renaming it as you add more compose actions. It'll be compose 1, compose 2, compose 3, compose 4, and that gets, and the only output is called outputs. So if you rename them, then when you look through your dynamic content, you'll see full name outputs, address outputs, zip code outputs. So does that make sense? Okay. Actual, awesome. All right, let's see. I'm really hoping that the get items is going to pop up here when I scroll. No, it's not going to, because next is troubleshooting. All right, so scope actions. I discovered these just maybe a year and a half ago. I think they were brand new, but I had not used them before, and I had workflows that were miles long, 6, 7 approvals deep. And then I discovered these scope actions, and what they are a container. So the text here is group related actions together in a workflow, keeps steps organized, improves error handling, can nest the scopes. So you can have a scope inside of a scope inside of a scope. And an example is grouping approval actions. So the way I use this, every workflow I do, every workflow has at least one trigger, only one trigger, which is the why am I working? What am I doing? When a new item in SharePoint is created, when a new Microsoft form is submitted, when someone clicks this button, launch this workflow. So that's the trigger. And then the actions are all the things that it's going to do. And every workflow is required to have at least one action. Otherwise, the trigger is irrelevant. I'm doing nothing. Yay. It's like all of our kids. When you're supposed to clean your room, no actions. So what I do, I have my trigger. I have a couple of actions at the top. Any variables that you're going to initialize have to be initialized at the top level outside of a scope. You can't put them inside of a scope or a loop or any of that. They have to be initialized at the top level. And then I have 3 scopes that I put into every workflow. I have one that's called actions. And then I have 2 that are parallel at the bottom. One of them is on success, and the scope is titled on success. And the second one is the run after is on failure, and the scope is called on failure. So what I found is I created one SharePoint list that's called workflow history. And inside of my workflows, at the very top, I create that first action. I write a record over to this workflow, or the workflow history SharePoint list that says, I'm running a workflow. This is which workflow it is. Here's a couple pieces of information. Here's a link to the workflow in case it breaks and you need to go see it again. And maybe even a link to the item itself from the SharePoint list or from whatever. Like a Microsoft form, you can't put a link back to it. And then those other 2 at the bottom, they go back and they set the status of that item. So if all of the actions succeed and it doesn't break, it goes to the on success one, which writes back to that SharePoint item and changes the status to completed or success. And if it breaks, it marks it as failed. And then I have, of course, an alert on that one that pings me and says, hey, you got another broken workflow. You got to go fix it. And again, usually it's because of bad data. So the scope actions will keep those groupings for me. And then inside of my actions scope, depending on what I'm building, I'll have more scopes inside of there. So if I've got a manager section and a director section and a GM section, I'll put a scope in there, title it manager section, do all the manager stuff, do the approval, submit back, send an email that says it's good, says now we're going to go talk to the director, have another scope that's called the director section, do the director stuff, another scope for the general manager or CEO. And then inside of those, you can even have more. So the scopes are just those containers. Inside of, if you open a filing cabinet, you don't just have, 4 feet of papers, right? You have dividers and folders, subfolders, maybe even folders inside of folders. Think of the scopes as those divider sections. And another amazing piece with the scope section is if you're doing the same set of actions over and over, but then you're going to tweak them. Like maybe I do the manager scope and create the whole approval process with the email and everything. And then I copy that scope action to my clipboard. I go down below that scope action and insert from my clipboard a copy of that same scope. I rename that one from manager to director, and then I tweak the things so I didn't have to build out all that structure again. That in and of itself is worth every penny that you didn't have to pay because scopes are included for free with the rest of the Power Automate. Oh, come on, that was hilarious. Thank you. Pity laughs, I get it. It's all good. Okay, so next we're going to hit the troubleshooting. Before we get there, back up at the beginning, we were supposed to have get items, which now I'm going to have to go back and look at we're going to go back and look at the very top at what we're going to learn and see what else didn't make it into the screens. Because before if-thens, we were supposed to talk about get. Get and update, if then, else, switch, run after. Okay, we covered everything but get. So, what's that? Get. So get and update. Get is we need to find the information from an outside source and bring it into the workflow. Update is we've done something, and so we're going to push back out. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the inside of get, where it gets nuanced, is there's a get item and a get items. Okay? It should be pretty clear. The one with the S is plural. Get item, we're going to get one. Get items, we're going to get one or more. Okay, so that's the key. It's one or more. Even if you're only getting one because you've narrowed down your filter to say, I only want the one that is this. It's still, if you're using a get items, it's still bringing back an array of items. It's just an array of one row. So the get item, so talking specifically about like a SharePoint get item, you have to tell it the ID. For a get item, you have to give it the ID of the item. Well, you don't necessarily know the ID. If you're when a new thing happened, the ID came through, so now you can go get the item with that ID. But if you're saying, go look into this list over here and find the item that Ruth submitted her travel request. Well, I know that it's Ruth, and I know that it's a travel request to Comms vNext. But I don't know the ID of the item. So I do a get items plural, and I do a filter where the traveler is named Ruth and the event is Comms vNext. And I'm just kind of making stuff up, But what it'll do is it'll go out to the SharePoint list and it'll pull back every record where Ruth is the traveler and the event is Comms vNext. So it may actually find 2023 and 2024 and 2025, or it may only find 2025, which is great. So we have one item. We got just the 2025 one item, but it's still an array. And so then you'll need to process that. You'll need to get the ID from the first record that it gave you, and then go do a get item using that ID. Okay, does that make sense? It's convoluted and it's 3 actions instead of 1, but that's how you get the one. Yeah, yes. You go look in the SharePoint list with your eyeballs and your mouse and your human being, and you get the ID, and then you...
The ID number, not
right.
long, complicated...
Not the GUID. No, so what the get item needs is you tell it, looking in this SharePoint site, in this SharePoint list, and this ID, because the ID is a unique identifier. So there's only one ID number 17. But
isn't there that behind it is like the numbers and letters?
The GUID.
String.
There is.
Call it GUID.
That's a GUID. Yeah. Graphical user identifier, maybe something like that.
Because when we were building a workflow for a cool vehicle approval,
Mhm.
it wasn't working, and we realized it wasn't getting that right ID of where it needed to go. So we went back and found it the hard way of getting that wrong ID.
Right.
Put that in there.
Okay. So for the recording, the question was about is it looking for the ID or the GUID? Is there another way to find it other than doing the 3 steps, using a filter query to narrow it down to the right one and then process it to find the ID and then go get that? And the short answer is no, because if you don't know, it doesn't look for the GUID. It looks for the unique ID in SharePoint, and specifically on a SharePoint list item. To do a get item, which is the one item, it needs the ID. It needs the unique identifier, which is the ID column of the SharePoint list, not the GUID. But to get that, you either have to be able to know what it is somehow, which once you're inside of a workflow and you're just going out to a list, you don't already have that data coming through. You have to go find it. So just like it'd be great if you opened up that file cabinet and it's page number 43, it's the 43rd paper back. So you can just count to 43 and that's the piece of paper. But you don't. So you open up the filing cabinet and you have to look for the section. You have to dig through and find it. And it's like, I know it's one of these pieces of paper. Even if you said, I know it's the only one that's yellow, you still have to go find which one is the yellow one. But what if there's 3 pieces of yellow paper in there? So the get items, that's back to it brings back an array, even if it's an array of 1. And so this, it sounds hacky, but which it is, and that's half of Power Automate. That's half of workflows in general is hacking. They gave us the basic blocks, but then you have to figure out how to work within those blocks to make exactly what you need. So I use a compose with an expression. I get the first item out of that, and I only want the ID field. And then I do a get item, choose the SharePoint site, the list, and in the ID field, I can put the outputs of that compose. And I name the compose statement, the exact car number or manager's ID or department ID. Oh, I'm sorry. I know they're wonderful, powerful things. I just hate content types.
We had to create it. It was originally created in 2010, so we had to follow that same methodology.
Yes.
It took us a couple months to do it, but we did it, and it turned out pretty well.
So,
Yeah, it was a process.
I'll summarize for the recording. They had a 2010 version, and somebody said, make it exactly like that. And they did. And somebody probably said, what's the point of the new stuff if we have to still make it the old way?
It was the flow, the whole Power Automate flow,
Right.
and it needs to still work in a shirt like this. So, but it works flawlessly now. So we did.
Awesome. Good job. So any more questions? Get items, update. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to zoom way out so I can scroll faster. How about this whiteboard? Pretty cool, right? Did I mention I'm the whiteboard guy? All right. So some troubleshooting basics. AI is really good, but not quite right. Not quite all the way there. I took my slide, my outline, and I'm like, hey, AI tool that's not Microsoft related, make me an image for this slide. I was thinking it's going to make me an image that I could put in PowerPoint next to my text. But instead, the first one, it made something like this, where it just took all my text, put it in a picture, put it all into one image. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, because I can then put that all into whiteboard and not have to use PowerPoint. So anyways, troubleshooting basics. Use the run history to find and understand your errors. So in Power Automate, and again, I assume that the other tools have the same functionality. After the flow has run, you can go into that flow and it'll show you the flow history. So it'll show you every run that's happened for the last 28 days. So Power Automate has a 28-day limit. You can only see the last 28 days worth of flow runs. But it'll tell you next to it if it was successful, canceled, or failed. And so you can then click on the flow run and it'll show you your entire workflow. But instead of being in edit mode with no information, it shows you exactly the data that came back. So you have the get item and it says we found item number 17 and here's the first name, here's the last name, here's the all of the information that comes back from that. You can find your compose statement and go, oh, well, when the compose after the get item, it found no items, so it failed. That's why it failed. Or whatever the reason is. You can go back through those run history and see exactly what happened so that you can troubleshoot where your problem is. And then you add in 5 more composes so you can catch the right pieces of data. Run it again. There's a resubmit button at the top. Run it a second time. Go look through all your composes and see that they're all wrong. Oh, maybe it's because I did the wrong expression. Or the date, I thought that it was coming back as year, month, day. It was actually coming back as month, day, year. It's actually European. It's, what is it? Day, month, year for European. And so you've got to, I'm trying to put this one to that one and they're not in the right format. So of course it failed. So then you need another compose to format the date properly, which you will be doing when you preview the data in compose statements. Use scopes if you're getting lost in the flow because you built a flow that's this long. Put in some scopes. Another nice thing with the scope and with like conditions like if-thens and the switches is that you can expand and contract. Yeah, expand and contract the statements. So if you've got a bunch of composes in the middle, you click on the header and it'll squeeze it short to just one row so that you can get more of your workflow on the screen at the same time. That's super helpful when you have the long workflows or, I know there's no problems inside of this scope. I know it's over here in this section. So just close that or squeeze your do while to just one row because that part's fine and you don't want to look at it over and over, or you don't want to accidentally click on it and break it. Add terminates. So we didn't talk about terminate statements. So there's an action that's just called terminate. So I do this a lot when I'm building a new workflow and I've built out a whole bunch of stuff that's going to email directors and managers and stuff, but I need to test I'm still trying to get the right information in. So I'll be way at the top before any of those outward bound things happen. I'll put a terminate statement in there. And in Power Automate, the 3 options are successful, failed, or canceled. So I usually use canceled so that I know this is one that I did and it canceled as opposed to success or rejected or failed. So I put those in up at the top long before it's ever going to send emails out to managers or to clients, hey, by the way, this thing broke. No, it didn't. I'm just testing stuff. So terminate statements are great. One other piece of information for a Power Automate, and this is kind of an advanced one, for a Power Automate workflow, you can turn them on and turn them off. If you have it turned off and the trigger is when a new item is created or when an item is modified and you've got the Power Automate turned off and someone's in there working on the flow, or maybe you share gated 2,000 records from a different list into this list, and you're like, my Power Automate's off, so it's not going to do anything. And it doesn't. It doesn't do anything. But then you get to Monday morning, and you're like, okay, I did the migration over the weekend. It's fine. I'm going to turn the workflow back on. It will go back and catch all 2,000 items that you did. And that really screwed me up on a Monday morning when accounts receivable or accounts payable got 2,000 emails saying we got new things. So that was when I learned the lesson. If you turn it off and you do things, especially share gating, and when you're going to turn it back on, you have your trigger and you have a terminate statement immediately. That way, when it does that stupid thing where it goes back and catches all the things, they just instantly terminate and nobody gets emails, nobody gets updates. It doesn't actually do anything specific. Make sense? Take it from me. Don't learn that one on your own, especially not on a Monday morning. All right, so our key takeaways. You don't need to be technical to build a workflow. It helps. You can do more technical things if you are more technical. ChatGPT, by the way, is pretty good at Power Automate. Not perfect. There are some actions and buttons and things that it tells you to do that don't actually exist. But you don't have to be technical to build, especially like basic workflows. Most people, the first workflow they do is something like, when there's a Twitter message or a Facebook message, send me an email. It's something with a keyword in it or something. I made the mistake of doing that for a demo in 2016, and it was in October, so right before the election. And I wanted to make sure that during my demo, I would have some stuff pop up so that I could show the flow runs and it would show the SharePoint list. So I put a workflow that says, if there are any tweets that have the word Clinton or Trump in them, add a thing to the SharePoint list. Worked perfectly. Within like 5 minutes, I had 25 items in the list. I'm like, see how it works? It's amazing. Finished the session. Someone asked me to do the same session at a demo or at a user group like 2 months later. So I'm like, okay, cool. And that was on a Thursday. So Tuesday night, I'm going through prepping it, making sure it's all good. I had not turned off the workflow through the election. And I had 25,000 items in my SharePoint list. Now, you can only delete 200 at a time. So, yeah. Yeah, 200, at least at that point. They might have increased it. I don't know that. I mean, at most 500, but I think it's still 200. So, yeah, another lesson learned. Don't do that. Turn off your workflows. And then put the terminate in, all that. Think in steps and decisions. So you can see the little workflow that she's drawing on the whiteboard, which is also the last one. Use Microsoft Whiteboard to draw it out. In Whiteboard, you just draw it kind of like Visio. You don't have to, put in all the ifs and the switches. You draw it and then go into the workflow tool that you're using to figure out the exact syntactical piece, if that's a switch versus a if then. But start simple and iterate. I need, when a new item is created, send Bob an email. Cool. Okay. And then Bob says, hey, you know what? I only need some of them. Okay. When a new item is created and you add a filter that says, when a new item is created, but the value is over $25,000, send Bob an email. And it's like, it'd be great if Sally got this email too, but her email needs to be different. On the new item, when it's these things, send Bob an email. Also send Sally a different email. Start small. Iterate through it. Add the new tasks, add the new actions as you need to go, as you need them. And of course, like I said, use Whiteboard to draw it out. And I think that's the last one. Any questions, comments, rude remarks? No, I'm not starting over. You came in late. I'm not starting over.
Right, you build your flow, right? You've got your tweaking working, and it's working beautifully the way you wanted it. But then, I don't know, the criteria changes, right?
Right.
Trump versus Clinton, it's whomever, right? Is there a good way to get notifications that, like, yes, my flow's not broken, but I'm not seeing the data come through on it, other than just me noticing that I'm no longer getting whatever that action is?
You could create another flow to monitor that flow. John smiled. Yes. You have a meeting to schedule a meeting to have a meeting about meeting with other people. Yes, that same concept.
Like any dashboarding tools.
Right.
You can kind of like track, like, hey, these are the 100 flows that we have in our environment. These are the ones that are enabled and still seeing action versus these ones that are enabled but not.
Right. That is an excellent question. So the question for the recording is there really boiled down, is there a good monitoring system for the flows, like to tell you that they're not happening as often? I have not used any. I don't do a whole lot with the Power Platform administration of Power Automate. John, would you happen to know?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in it, but in the Power Platform Admin Center, there's reporting at like the environment level. So you can split up your like workloads into different environments.
Right.
Segment your users. Inside there's some reporting, but I'm not.
I don't think it goes that granular though.
From like graph API levels, you can build like your own Power BI dashboards and stuff. At least that's what we're doing at UI. We have extensive reporting, but we also have like an army of Power BI people.
Right.
So
It's better some trick because I get emails saying that my flow hasn't ran in 30 days.
Yes. So there is that. If it hasn't run in I want to say 90 days. So the first thing is Power Automate flows will time out at 28 days. So if you have one flow that's running, it's like waiting for Bob to approve it, but Bob's been on vacation or in the hospital and nobody catches that it's waiting at 28 days from the time it started, not from the time Bob got assigned, from the time it started. 28 days, Microsoft considers that a long running flow and will cancel it or fail it. And to your point, if it hasn't been run in like 90 days, you'll get an email saying it hasn't been run, we're going to turn it off. And then you have to go back in and turn it on. There are, and that's in a much more advanced class, there are flows that you can use that will go watch that and it'll see that one got, because that's just another list. It's another SQL table or a SharePoint list or whatever. It'll see that one got switched to turned off and it will turn it back on for you. And one of the ways that we get around that too is we will go find that workflow. We will put a terminate in right after the trigger. We'll run it once, take the terminate back out, and now we have 90 more days. So those enterprise ones that like, it's just waiting for something random to happen, but that random thing hopefully only happens a couple times a year. Well, hopefully it hasn't turned itself off the day before the one random thing happens. You know, your car insurance gets canceled the day before you total your car, or you just put gas in the car. That was, I totaled a car the day after I filled it up with gas once. That's, sure. While he's coming up, so you want me to unplug, I assume? So while he's showing this, if anyone can tell me, I've got this cool Logitech little earbuds. Someone can tell me a really cool workflow logic-y thing that I didn't cover in this that you know or you thought of. First person gets these. I said cool. I already told you how I feel about content types. It is my opinion. So what about content types?
Well, what we ended up doing was we created the content type because it had all these choices, right? So somebody puts in a submission for the full vehicle request. And so that email, we had to do the whole compose thing, and we had this really detailed email of compose. And then once that email went to the person, then they were able to put in what they wanted. They got to choose. So then an email went off to the approver, and the approver opened it up, and they were able to switch the content type, gave them the information that they needed to fill out, and then they filled out that information, assigned the pool vehicle, and then that person gets an email back saying, your approval has been requested, and we put it in big bold letters in the subject line, because people were missing that. They were like, why isn't my car around? Well, read. So we put it in the subject line, the pool vehicle, and the pool vehicle that they were assigned.
Right.
So
if you're not familiar with content types, in a SharePoint list, you can apply content types. So let's say you have 25 columns in the SharePoint list. And so you might have a content type. So this was vehicle, like checking in and checking out. So you might have a content type for the requester, and that content type will only show on the form the first 10 fields. You know, I need a car. I need this big of a car. I need it for these days. I'm using it for this purpose. And then the supervisor might get like 3 of those columns plus 5 other columns in their content type. So they can say, I see that Ruth needed this car for these days. I approve it. And here's my comments about it. And then maybe the fleet manager has certain other columns that they see in their content type. And then, yes, the workflow will work with the content types to populate and to do decisions based on the content type. So real quick. Oh, yeah.
So,
There's a clip somewhere.
okay, so for reporting in Power Automate, at a very basic level, you can build like custom reports and stuff using the raw data. But if you go into the Power Platform Admin Center, you can go under Analytics to Power Automate. Power Apps are separate, things like that. Inside of Power Automate, there's an overview that you get like basic usage of flows. You also get a raw inventory of like what flows are in the environment, who created them, things like that. In my opinion, you get better, more detailed information at the environment level. So this is for like the entire tenant. If I go into the environment view, then I can filter based off of like which environment I'm looking at. So like this is my default in my MVP tenant. And I can see that like the number of runs per day, like by day. And then you can see the creation. So this would be like your inventory of like how active people are creating things. Usage would be where you're going to see over here on the right-hand side, the list of flows that are in use. I don't have any in this environment because it's like empty, but you'd be able to like sort that by the number of runs. So you could like find things that haven't run, connectors, and then probably one of the more important ones is the shared information, where you could see like who's sharing Power Automate flows with other people, because that's an indicator that something might be coming quasi-production and it's getting important, which means you want to like go wrap your admin arms around it and make sure that that person who created it doesn't leave the company, and then now this thing that was business critical you never heard of is all of a sudden not working anymore. So you might keep an eye on like that shared tab. But yeah,
my manager died on Christmas Day.
Oh wow!
Unexpectedly, and she had built a whole bunch of stuff. We had no idea.
Yeah,
it was my job to build it, but she had built it. I had no idea where it was, what it was doing. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go find all of those photos that she had done, and she had to share them with me.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps.
So thank you. I'm happy to stick around. But
thanks, Jonathan. Good job.
Thank you.